A few weeks ago, we discussed the case of the failed stunt by Red Bull, which involved the two cousins from the United States of America, Andrew Farrington and Louis Aikens. These are the fellas who took two Cessna 182s to the skies without, getting the necessary exemption from the FAA for the stunt that they wanted to pull. You remember that video? You can check it up on my playlist. These guys wanted to take off in actually two different aircrafts, while in mid-air jump out of the pilot seat of each aircraft, swap places while the planes were free falling to the ground. The whole aim was to actually be the first to do this, to do a mid-air plane swap. One aircraft crashed because the other fella could not re-enter that aircraft as it went into a spiral dive. The one fella managed to re-enter the next aircraft, and he landed thereafter. But the major thing was that for anyone to do that, for that to be within the law, the regulator must actually authorize this. They must give you an exemption to the rules that require that there must be someone at the controls of an aircraft at all times. There are two exceptions to that. If you're to leave that station for purposes of physiological needs, you must attend to some physiological need of yours as a pilot. Then you are allowed to leave the control seat of the aircraft. Secondly, if you are expected to leave that particular seat as part of the operations of the aircraft, if the safe operation of the aircraft requires you to leave the seat, then that is allowed. But what these gentlemen intended to do did not necessarily involve any of the two things I've listed above. They simply wanted to do this for fame. They simply wanted to do this to demonstrate that they can, for no other reason but the fact that they can. So they applied to the FAA, and the FAA declined the exemption. A normal person would actually stop there and not proceed. But no, not these two cousins. They decided, who's the FAA to tell us not to go ahead anyway? So despite the FAA giving them, written notice that your application for exemption has been declined, they went ahead anyway. So in our last discussion, we asked the question, what is likely to happen to these two law breakers? And that which we asked can now be answered. On Thursday, the 12th of April, Thursday the 12th of May 2022, the FAA announced that it had actually revoked the licenses of the two cousins involved in that failed Red Bull mid-air plane swap. The FAA called their actions reckless, careless, and an endangerment of life and property. In other words, the lives and properties of others were endangered by this callous and careless approach to aviation by these two cousins. In the letter that they sent to Louis Aikens, they detailed reasons why his license was going to be revoked. They also visited upon him a fine of almost $5,000 that he must pay. He was instructed to submit back to the FAA every certificate, that is a license, every certificate that has been issued to him. Now, this fella holds a commercial pilot license. He also holds a remote pilot license, which means he can fly unmanned aircraft, he can fly drones. He's supposed to return all those licenses and any other license ever issued to him back to the FAA. The only thing that he can keep is his aviation medical. So for a year, he is banned from reapplying for another license. Those are the consequences of going against the rules as those two cousins did. But what does this revocation mean? If the FAA revokes your license, or any regulator revokes your license, at the end of the period they've stipulated, which in this case is a year, what does that mean? What will happen then? Does it mean these cousins can 12 months from now inform the FAA that, listen, 12 months is up, can you courier our licenses back to us? Not necessarily. It does not work like that. What this means is that these cousins, the expiry of the time stipulated by the FAA, they have to reapply for their licenses. That reapplication process requires them to retake the test they had taken to actually be issued with those licenses. In other words, they must write whatever examinations are supposed to be written to actually get back those licenses. So, in this particular case, the fella has a CPL, a commercial pilot license. Now, the requirements of a commercial pilot license are that you must first have a private pilot license, which means for this fella to regain his commercial pilot license, he must first satisfy the requirements for a private pilot license. So after a year, he must go write the exams as required and undertake the test for a PPL. Having passed that, he must then go and do the same for the commercial pilot license. All other ratings that are required in the process must also be obtained afresh as if they were not there before. So this fella must still go and do his night rating. He must still go and do his instrument rating. He must still go and do his multi-engine rating, and so forth and so forth. He must be tested, and he must undergo some training with the CFI in the US. So it's not as easy as it looks. It's not as easy. The consequences can be dire. The consequences can be costly. The consequences can be, time consuming and downright annoying, because you've held these licenses. You've flown under these licenses. You're competent enough, but you decided, who is the FAA to tell me what to do? I will do my thing. I will exempt myself. I will ignore their communication that my exemption has been declined, and I will go ahead with my mid-air plane swap anyway. And those are the consequences of not abiding by the rules as stipulated in the regulations. Can this too be rehabilitated? I mean, any offender, we must ask that question. Can this offender be rehabilitated? If judging by the interviews that these cousins had after, performing that stunt, it does not necessarily seem like they understand the gravity, the nature and quality of their act. They seem to look on the side of fame and on the side of proving a point. They seem to believe that what they did was not necessarily wrong per se. Louis Akins is on record saying that he regrets not informing his team that the FAA had declined their application for exemption. That's the only thing he regrets, really. He doesn't regret violating the rules and endangering the lives and property of others. He goes on to say in some media report that cites him, he goes on to say that the event was a success. That cannot be true. The event was not a success. The one plane crashed. He doesn't call it a crash. He says the second plane landed with a parachute. My goodness, even if the plane deployed a parachute as it went down, that is not to be considered a landing. That is a crash. He crashed the second plane, the one that he abandoned, and was able to rejoin his cousin's plane, but his cousin couldn't rejoin his initial plane. So from the looks of how they are treating this issue and how they're responding to media questions, it looks like these two cousins are far from rehabilitation. But perhaps the fact that what lies ahead now is a huge task for them to regain their licenses after the period of ban is over. Perhaps that will sober them up. Perhaps that will make them realize that lawlessness, this cowboy approach to doing things, cannot really take aviation forward. This tendency to actually approach aviation with the sense of impunity, that I can do 1, 2, 3 and nobody can visit any consequences upon me, does not take the aviation sector anywhere. Perhaps now that their wings have been clipped, the skies are safer. My name is Angelo Dube, and I thank you for watching this channel and for supporting it and for helping it grow. And as we grow, let's grow together. Keep sharing this in your community of aviators. Let other aviators know that there's a channel called, Angelo Dube, the Flying Jurist. Put it in your social media spaces. Put it in your Facebook, your WhatsApp, your Instagram, everywhere you can. And thank you for sharing, watching, liking the videos, and for subscribing. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, we always say with every hour the cockpit beckons. Whatever hour it is that you are investing your time in, let it count. Let it count. It takes you closer to your goal. Cheers.